Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. Have you ever wondered what lies behind the enigmatic Star of David? A symbol filled with mysteries and profound meanings, transcending centuries and defying any attempt at a simple explanation. Also known as the Seal of Solomon, its history is far more complex than most imagine. Although often associated with Jewish traditions, the Star of David holds a much broader connection. It crosses cultural and religious boundaries, being recognized and revered by different peoples across various parts of the world. But what does it really represent? And why is it so present in such diverse cultures? In this video, we'll embark on a fascinating and revealing journey, uncovering the origins and secrets surrounding this star. Get ready to discover that its story is not confined to the Jewish people. It extends far beyond, touching ancient civilizations and universal concepts that still echo to this day. Before we begin, don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss any part of this journey into the unknown. Together, we'll explore the true essence of the Star of David, a symbol that, to this day, holds enigmas few dare to unravel. Although widely recognized in popular imagination as the Star of David, the symbol is actually called the Magen David in Jewish tradition. The word Magen in Hebrew translates to shield or buckler, while David refers to King David, one of the most emblematic figures in the history of Israel and the Jewish people. Therefore, the more accurate translation would be Shield of David, not Star of David, as commonly understood. This symbol is not merely an identifier of Judaism, but also an expression of Jewish identity in its deepest cultural sense. Over the centuries, the Magen David became strongly associated with Judaism, widely used as a symbol of faith and resilience, especially during times of persecution. However, it's important to recognize that its history and meaning go far beyond this religious connection, also involving various esoteric practices and occult traditions, particularly in ancient cultures. Its basic shape, a hexagram formed by the overlay of two equilateral triangles, one pointing up and the other down, gives it a simple aesthetic, yet one that is rich in symbolism. Interestingly, unlike other more specifically Jewish symbols directly tied to religious tradition, such as the menorah, the lion of the tribe of Judah, featured on the tribal banner, the shofar, or the lulav, the Magen David was not originally an exclusive emblem of Judaism. In fact, the hexagram is a geometric figure widely used throughout human history, known by various ancient cultures for both decorative and symbolic purposes. Its simple yet powerful design led it to be incorporated into multiple traditions and contexts, including art and architecture in non-Jewish cultures. It has even been found in churches in the Galilee region, where it was used as a decorative element. Beyond its aesthetic appeal, it's important to highlight that symbols, no matter how simple they may seem at first glance, often carry multiple and complex meanings. In the case of the Magen David, its symbolic weight extends well beyond its geometric simplicity. Over time, it has become a symbol of perseverance, resistance, and unity for the Jewish people, especially during times of adversity and persecution. It has evolved into an emblem of Jewish national identity, a sign of solidarity and strength in the face of historical challenges. The impact of the Magen David became even more profound with its adoption by the Zionist movement in the 19th century, when it became a symbol of the desire for an independent Jewish state. Its placement on the national flag of the State of Israel in 1948 solidified its status not only as a religious symbol, but also as a national and political emblem. From that moment on, the Magen David came to be recognized worldwide as a representation of the struggle for self-determination and Jewish national identity, establishing itself as a universal icon of identity and solidarity. The power of this symbol, therefore, transcends the religious sphere. It reflects the historical, cultural, and political journey of a people who, throughout millennia, saw their symbol adopted by different contexts and cultures, but never lost its essence of resilience and unity. For this reason, the Magen David is not merely a religious symbol, It is also a reflection of the history of a people who, in the face of adversity, found in the Shield of David a way to recognize and unite themselves, regardless of circumstance. What is at stake with the Magen David is more than simple aesthetics or the use of a geometric shape. It represents a deep cultural and spiritual legacy that over the centuries has reinvented and adapted itself to new realities, remaining relevant across different historical moments and diverse contexts. Thus, it continues to be, to this day, one of the most powerful symbols of Jewish identity and the struggle for recognition and survival of a people. Some scholars suggest that the term Seal of Solomon was adopted into Jewish tradition from esoteric practices found in Islamic magical literature. However, the question surrounding the origin of the symbol and its terminology remains shrouded in mystery, as it is difficult to determine whether the name Shield of David has roots in Islamic mysticism or stems from even older Jewish beliefs and practices. This debate over its origin is a central point in the symbol's history, as different lines of research present varying perspectives. One of the strongest arguments for a Jewish origin of the symbol, both in terms of terminology and esoteric philosophy, lies in references found in the Talmud, which mentions a hexagram engraved on the mythical Seal of Solomon. This artifact, immortalized in various traditions, carried a symbolic connection to divine power and mystical protection. The Seal of Solomon was considered a powerful emblem, associated with the wisdom and authority of King Solomon, but also seen as a spiritual amulet. Furthermore, the history of Jewish alchemists plays an important role in this context, as many of them, acting as mentors and influencers, passed their ideas and teachings to Muslim and Christian alchemists, strengthening the exchange of cultural and symbolic influences among these traditions. Among these historical and cultural figures, one particularly stands out: Maria the Jewess, a philosopher and alchemist from Alexandria, who lived between the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, known as the Opener of Ways. Maria was a pioneer in formulating alchemical concepts that would go on to influence later generations of alchemists in both the Islamic and Christian worlds. According to some interpretations, her ideas can be graphically associated with the symbolism of the hexagram, as her teachings were strongly connected to the opposition of the two triangles that form the geometric figure. Although the explicit use of the hexagram as a symbol was established later, during Maria's time, the philosophical and spiritual connections that would be reflected in the symbol's design were already present. The cultural exchange and mystical influences among Judaism, Islam, and Christianity over the centuries demonstrate how the hexagram, more than a simple symbol, became a transcultural figure, assuming different meanings in various contexts. However, it was within Judaism that the hexagram found a place of prominence, particularly with its incorporation as an emblem of Jewish identity and spirituality. This gradual absorption of the symbol, which became solidified in the collective imagination as the Star of David, reflects how symbols can transcend their origins and take on new meanings over time. The use of the hexagram as a symbol tied to Jewish mysticism only became firmly established in Jewish magical texts and amulets from the early Middle Ages, a time when mystical and esoteric traditions were thriving. In this context, many contemporary scholars point to the possible influence of Islamic mysticism on the use of the hexagram by Jewish Kabbalists, especially in medieval Spain. The interaction among these mystical currents, nurtured by the exchange of knowledge and cultural coexistence between Jewish, Muslim, and Christian communities, helped shape the hexagram into a hallmark of Kabbalah and Jewish spiritual teachings. However, a lingering question remains. Does the Star of David truly represent the Jewish people and King David? Or rather, was its adoption as a symbol of Israel more of a symbolic allusion to these elements, without a direct historical connection to the biblical monarch? To better understand this question, it is necessary to explore the primary interpretations of the symbol's roots and meanings. One of the most widely accepted versions within Judaism is the rabbinic interpretation, which suggests that the hexagram, also known as the Star of David, has origins directly connected to the name of David. According to this tradition, blacksmiths of the time sought to honor King David by incorporating his name into the design of shields. This symbolic tribute to the monarch, tied to the concept of protection, aimed to associate David's name with the safety and strength of the Israelite army. Other versions propose that the blacksmiths, in crafting the shields, would inscribe the name of David on each one as a form of spiritual and symbolic protection. According to these interpretations, Phoenician characters, a script that preceded square Hebrew writing, were used to form the name David. The angular lines and geometric shapes of these characters may have given rise to the design that would later be recognized as the hexagram. Thus, the shape became both a stylized representation of David's name and a symbol of spiritual and military protection, reflecting the desire for divine safety over the people of Israel. Although this version is widely accepted within religious circles, it is not unanimous among scholars. Many argue that the popularization of the hexagram within the Jewish context was a gradual process, one shaped by cultural exchanges and esoteric practices that crossed borders and religious boundaries. While the exact origin remains debated, the symbol's association with King David and its link to Jewish identity helped establish it as an emblem of faith, unity, and resistance throughout the centuries. During the process of inscribing the name of David onto shields, something curious happened. The letters that made up the name began to merge in a unique way, forming a symmetrical and geometric shape that is now recognized as the Star of David, or hexagram. What started as an attempt to inscribe the king's name into a protective symbol evolved into a universal emblem of strength and identity, one that transcended time and cultures. From that moment on, the hexagram would no longer represent merely the name of a king, but would become a lasting symbol of the Jewish people's unity and resilience. This symbolic transformation becomes even more intriguing when we consider Phoenician script, which predates modern Hebrew and is of vital importance to understanding the origins of deeply rooted symbols in Jewish tradition. The name David in Hebrew, composed of 3 letters, Dalet, Vav, and Dalet, contains a feature that reveals a historically rich layer. The letter Dalet, in its archaic form, resembles a triangle, possessing a precise geometric structure. Vav, although not triangular, appears positioned between the 2 dalles. What emerges then is the formation of 2 triangles, which, when aligned, give rise to one of the most emblematic symbols of Jewish culture, the hexagram. This striking overlay of geometric forms is not mere coincidence, but rather a visual evolution that produced what we now know as the Star of David. One triangle points upward, symbolizing human aspiration toward the divine, while the other points downward, representing the descent of divine energy into the earthly realm. The fusion of these 2 forms thus becomes a perfect reflection of mutual connection between humanity and the divine. In ancient times, especially in the use of Phoenician script, the name David was pronounced David, revealing a slightly different sound and structure from that of modern Hebrew. This detail helps us understand that the symbolism which eventually emerged was not necessarily consciously designed, but rather the result of a kind of natural evolution, perhaps even accidental, shaped by the hands of craftsmen like blacksmiths, as they attempted to engrave the name David into battle shields. As such, the hexagram born from this fusion of dalets began to acquire a much broader symbolic meaning. It was no longer just a graphic representation of David's name, but a form loaded with profound spiritual and theological significance. In Jewish tradition, this star came to be seen as a symbol of divine protection, an amulet that represented the connection between heaven and earth. That connection became a central element of Jewish mysticism, and the hexagram, or Star of David, took on a spiritual weight that far surpassed its geometric simplicity. According to rabbinic tradition, Jewish scholars see in the Star of David a manifestation of divine protection, a reflection of heavenly forces watching over the people of Israel. The Star of David is often confused with the Seal of Solomon, which, although visually similar, carries slightly different interpretative nuances. The distinction between these two symbols, while subtle, is significant for many scholars and mystics. Some advocate the idea that the Seal of Solomon is a distortion of the original symbol of David, altered as a result of King Solomon's own actions and choices. It is believed that, influenced by pagan practices and idolatry, Solomon ultimately corrupted the original meaning of the Star of David, which, in its essence, represents the purity of connection between the human and the divine. In contrast, the Seal of Solomon, associated with idolatry and sorcery, came to symbolize something darker and more ambiguous. This interpretation is based on a more critical view of Solomon, who, after becoming involved with many foreign and idolatrous women, began to drift away from the faith of his father David. The transformation of the symbol, therefore, could be interpreted as a direct consequence of Solomon's spiritual departure. Scholars assert that the intertwining of geometric shapes within the Seal of Solomon reflects a transformation of the original symbolism of the Star of David. This shift can be seen as a reflection of Solomon himself, who, by involving himself with women from various cultures and religions, ultimately altered the meaning of his own legacy. In his pursuit of power and pleasure, Solomon formed unions with women from numerous pagan nations: Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. These alliances directly violated God's instructions to the people of Israel, who, according to the Bible, were commanded to avoid intermarriage with pagan nations. Nevertheless, Solomon gave in to the pressure of his wives and concubines, amassing 700 wives and 300 concubines, a clear departure from the purity of the faith upheld by his father David. The influence of these women, particularly in their worship of foreign gods, led Solomon to make decisions that would be considered grave transgressions from the standpoint of his religious tradition. He built altars and shrines dedicated to pagan deities such as Ashtoreth, goddess of the Sidonians, Moloch, god of the Ammonites, and Chemosh, god of the Moabites. These actions, recorded in the Old Testament, especially in the book of 1 Kings, reveal how Solomon's faith was corroded, leading him to commit acts considered abominations in the eyes of God. The turning point in Solomon's story occurs when, under the influence of his foreign wives, he permits pagan worship to spread throughout Israel. We witness a king who, in his old age, turned away from the path of his father David and became entangled in idolatrous practices, resulting in a significant departure from true faith. Returning to the hexagram, widely recognized today as the Star of David, it is noteworthy that the Bible never explicitly mentions the use of this symbol by the people of Israel as an emblem of David. This is striking, especially considering that the concept of a star in biblical tradition is often associated with idolatrous practices, a recurring violation among the Israelites when they strayed from true worship. The term star in Scripture sometimes carries a negative connotation, representing false gods and pagan deities. A clear example of this can be found in the book of Amos, where the star is linked to a form of idolatry practiced by the Israelites, particularly during periods of spiritual rebellion. This same critique is echoed in the New Testament, specifically in the book of Acts of the Apostles, which references similar idol worship practices. One archaeological discovery that draws the attention of scholars is a Jewish seal dated to the 6th century BCE, unearthed in excavations at the ancient city of Sidon. This seal features a symbol that, at first glance, resembles what would later be popularly known as the Star of David. However, the historical context in which this artifact was produced must be approached with caution. The 6th century BCE was a time marked by a growing inclination among the people of Israel toward idolatry, a trend that drew sharp criticism from prophets like Amos, who lived during that very period. In his writings, Amos issues a scathing critique of the widespread idolatry among the Israelites. In Amos 5:25-27, he conveys God's condemnation of the nation, accusing them of turning from true worship to serve idols and celestial symbols, elements associated with foreign gods. The passage, in one of its common translations, reads, "Did you bring me sacrifices and offerings for 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? No, but you have borne the tabernacle of your king, Sikkuth, and Chion your images, the star of your God, which you made for yourselves. Therefore, I will send you into exile beyond Damascus, says the Lord, whose name is the God of hosts. In the Almeida translation, the same verses read, Did you offer me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel? But you carried the tabernacle of your Moloch and the star of your God, your images, which you made for yourselves. Therefore, I will cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, says the Lord, whose name is the God of hosts. This denunciation by Amos is forceful. The Israelites not only abandoned God, but also created and worshipped pagan gods, represented by symbols like the star, symbols associated with deities such as Remphan, a foreign god whose worship is condemned in the scriptures. The mention of star gods is particularly intriguing, as it reveals the ancient practice of attributing a sacred or divine nature to the star, something not uncommon in many ancient cultures. In fact, many scholars believe that the reference to the Star of David may have far more complex and controversial origins, tied to the symbolism of idolatry. The star, in many ancient cultures, was strongly associated with the heavens and astronomical deities, often used as a representation of celestial gods. However, some schools of thought propose an alternative view, suggesting that both the Star of David and the Seal of Solomon could simply be seen as generic representations of a star, without any inherently idolatrous meaning. According to this perspective, the star shape used across various cultures may have been interpreted in different ways, without a fixed symbolic pattern, perhaps reflecting the diverse spiritual and symbolic understandings of those ancient peoples. Still, this theory is called into question when we examine archaeological and cultural evidence. Civilizations like the Akkadians and Sumerians in Mesopotamia, for instance, used star symbols closely linked to the cosmos, but also deeply connected to the worship of celestial bodies and gods. The use of a star to represent cosmic deities was therefore not a coincidence, but rather a reflection of widespread religious practices in that region of the ancient world, including the worship of astral gods. This connection between stars and astronomical deities opens up an important discussion about the symbolism and evolution of religious icons over the centuries. Thus, the Star of David, also known as the hexagram or even the Star of Remphan, emerges as a symbol whose roots appear to be deeply grounded in paganism. From this perspective, the symbol would have no direct connection to King David or to the Seal of Solomon, as often claimed. On the contrary, it would be more closely associated with a pagan deity called Remphan, mentioned in the scriptures as a god worshipped by the Israelites during times of apostasy. As already discussed, the Book of Amos offers a clear reference to this connection, portraying the star not as a sacred emblem or national symbol, but as a foreign idol. This interpretation is significant, as it helps us understand the symbolism of the hexagram in other ancient cultures. The fact that this symbol appears across various pagan traditions, often associated with mystical and magical practices, supports the idea that, far from being a symbol of religious purity, it actually represented the influence of beliefs and rituals that clashed with the faith of Israel. In many of these cultures, the hexagram was used as an amulet or a symbol of supernatural power, something that, in the words of Amos, served only to lead the people away from true worship of God. Now I'd like to ask you, dear viewers, which origin do you find more plausible for the Star of David? Does its connection to the Star of Remphan make more sense, or is the association with the Seal of Solomon more convincing? I leave this question open for discussion in the comments below because there are many interpretations worth examining, and I believe that the exchange of ideas can greatly enrich our understanding of this historically charged and controversial symbol. Additionally, a common question arises among those who study the history of Israel. What is, in fact, the true symbol that represents the nation or identity of Israel? Although the Star of David is undoubtedly the most recognized symbol today, it is worth reflecting on what the scriptures actually say. In my opinion, the menorah, the seven-branched candelabrum, is the most biblically grounded symbol representing the people of Israel. This candelabrum, placed first in the tabernacle and later in the temple in Jerusalem, holds a deep spiritual and historical connection to the Israelite tradition, and for a long time was seen as the true symbol of national identity. Finally, I sincerely thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope it has provided an insightful and thought-provoking reflection on the history and symbolism of the Star of David, and that it sparked new questions and discoveries for you. May God bless each and every one of you, and may we continue together in our pursuit of knowledge and understanding. See you soon.